All right, we are moving on to topic 3, lesson 1, Egypt under the Pharaohs. So let's go ahead and start listening to the lesson.
Lesson 1. Egypt under the Pharaohs. Like the Fertile Crescent of Mesopotamia, Egypt was home to one of the world's first great civilizations. As in the Fertile Crescent, Egypt's civilization developed in a river valley with rich soil. However, Egypt's geography and culture differed in many ways from those of the Fertile Crescent.
All right, let's go ahead and watch this video. I'm going to make it full screen so that you can see it better.
Let's talk about Egypt, one of the greatest civilizations in world history. Ever wonder how it got started? In a word, location. In ancient Egypt's case, the region's geography was a primary reason for its success. More specifically, the Nile River. The Nile is one of the world's longest rivers. Beginning in what is today the country of Sudan, it flows more than 4,000 miles north to the Mediterranean Sea. The Nile carries silt, which is fine sand or clay. Silt is key to creating fertile soil. Every year when the Nile flooded its banks, the river left behind silt, which fertilized the land. Ancient Egyptian farmers learned to build earthen walls around their fields to trap the Nile's floodwaters. The water would soak into the soil, allowing grains like wheat to grow. Early irrigation. Irrigation allowed the land to be farmed even though the region received less and less rain over time. And it's how Egyptian farmers were able to grow large surpluses of food. Egypt was a complex society, once divided into upper and lower kingdoms. Narmer, the first pharaoh, or king, united the two kingdoms and began a hierarchical system of government under the pharaoh's rule. You've probably heard of the famous King Tut. 3 other famous pharaohs were Hatshepsut, Thutmose III, and Ramses II. Politically, the pharaoh relied on a bureaucracy, a system of offices and officials that handled the government's business. Egypt's bureaucracy and system of taxation were a model for later governments that still continue today. It helps to think of Egyptian society as a pyramid, with the pharaoh presiding at the top. Just below pharaohs were nobles, priests, and officials. Next were scribes, followed by merchants and artisans, with farmers, servants, and slaves just beneath them. This system was adhered to so strictly because of Egypt's strong religious devotion. The Egyptians were a deeply religious people who saw their pharaoh as an all-powerful god-king, controlling everything and commanding loyalty. Service to this god-king would provide them with rewards after death. The Egyptians believed in many gods to whom they built temples and offered gifts. Many wealthy Egyptians were mummified after death and buried in elaborate tombs with all of the goods they might need for the afterlife. How was the Nile important to Egypt's success?
That's a great question, one in which we are going to learn more about. The Nile was key to success. You saw in that video how the Nile would flood. So what happened? And you see it right down here on Dixie. If you take Dixie and head towards Birch Run, you see there is it's called Hoffman Park. It's right on the curve where you could go left to go to Frankenmuth or keep going on Dixie Highway to go to Birch Run like Meyer. On the right-hand side, there is a park there, and it floods every spring. So this still happens. When the Cass River floods, in that water there is silt. And as that water comes over the land, it drops that little silt onto the dirt. And then as that water recedes back into the river, the silt stays in the farmland. So that silt then gives nutrients and minerals to whatever the farmer is going to plant there. That silt is very important still today to help with farming. It makes for better and bigger crops every year. And we already know the more crops you have, the more surplus you have. And the more surplus you have, the better life can be. So let's go ahead. That was just a summary. Let's go ahead and look at these vocab words. There are 7 of them. Pages 1 and 2 in your digital notebook are your 7 vocab words. The first word, cataract. That is a group of rocky rapids. Delta. Oh, there it is. A flat plain formed on the seabed where a river deposits material over many years. Artisan. Skilled worker who practices a handicraft. Pharaoh. A pharaoh is like a king. So a pharaoh is just a different name for king, and this is a king of ancient Egypt. The only time you're going to see a pharaoh is in Egypt. Dynasty. A series of rulers from the same family. Bureaucracy. System of many government officials who carry out government rules and regulations. And lastly, mummy, a body that has been preserved so it will not decompose. Go ahead and get those words. There are 7 words there, and then come on back and we're going to do page 3 still in this video. All right, let's go to the next page. Let's move on to page 3 in your digital notebook. We're going to click next. If you are using your e-text, we'll click next to go to the next page. Remember, if there is this block in front of your words, click that arrow and it will get rid of them. So we have 3 questions on page 3. Those 3 questions are in these first few paragraphs under the Nile River Valley. Let's go ahead and listen to the Nile River Valley and then we'll pause it.
The Nile River Valley. The ancient Egyptians treasured the Nile River. They knew that without the Nile, their land would be nothing but a sun-baked desert of bright blue skies and dry sand.
So very true. So the Nile River is really the key to why a civilization was able to live along the Nile River. So the next section, the world's longest river. You're going to see there are 2 questions that will be answered under this. I'm going to let the whole section play. The first question, what is the source of the Nile? You'll find that answer in this yellow circled paragraph. And then how many cataracts did the ancient Nile River go through? You'll find that answer in this pink highlighted paragraph. So let's go ahead and listen.
The world's longest river. The Nile is the world's longest river. It begins in East Africa and flows about 3,500 miles north to the Mediterranean Sea. This great river has 2 main sources, the White Nile and the Blue Nile. The White Nile flows from Lake Victoria. The Blue Nile rushes down from the highlands of present-day Ethiopia. The 2 rivers meet in present-day Sudan. In ancient times, northern Sudan was known as Nubia or Kush. In Kush and Egypt, the Nile flows through the Sahara, a vast desert that stretches across most of northern Africa. Before reaching Egypt, the river in ancient times roared through 6 cataracts, or groups of rocky rapids. The rocky cataracts made it impossible for people to travel by ship upstream from Egypt.
All right, again, number 1, what is the source of the Nile River? So there's actually 2 sources, just a heads up. What are the sources of the Nile? Go ahead and get that answer now. Number 2, how many cataracts did the ancient Nile River go through? That answer will be in this pink highlighted paragraph. Get that answer now. All right, let's go ahead and look at this last question. It's going to be under Upper and Lower Egypt. What is silt? You'll find that answer in this green highlighted paragraph. Go ahead and listen.
Upper and Lower Egypt. Below the cataracts, the Nile flows through a narrow valley lined with cliffs. This region is known as Upper Egypt because it is upstream from the Mediterranean Sea. The river carries silt, fine mineral particles that can form fertile soil. from its sources in East Africa. Near the end of its journey, the Nile slows down and fans out into many streams and marshy areas. As it slows, the river drops its silt. Over thousands of years, this silt has built up to form a large river delta. A delta is an area of sediment, soil, or minerals carried by water, deposited at the mouth of a river. The Nile Delta forms the region known as Lower Egypt.
All right, again, what is silt? You'll find that answer in this green highlighted paragraph.